The school invited my ex to give a lecture. In the packed auditorium of 1,000 people. He projected his computer desktop onto the large screen. The wallpaper was my drowsy sleeping face. The students erupted into an uproar. With a microphone pinned to him, he said calmly, "This is my beloved. Beloved my foot. We just broke up half a month ago." I got up and wanted to slip away, when I saw the counselor standing aside and smiling at me. The buttocks that had been lifted halfway were put down again. The counselor nodded at me, his eyes kind, indicating to me, "It's okay. The university doesn't oppose dating." I sat gloomily back on the chair. An hour later, the lecture finally ended and it came to the question and answer session. Hands were raised one after another in the audience. After a few serious questions, seeing that Stephen was easy to talk to, the audience began to stir. A boy took the microphone. "Teacher Song. Regarding the girl on your wallpaper, you call her beloved. Are you already married?" Stephen actually answered this kind of absurd question that is completely unrelated to the theme. I saw him say, "Not yet. But it will be soon." He switched the screen back to the desktop, and an enlarged face of a young girl instantly occupied the 3 large screens of the lecture hall. The girl's black hair was intertwined and spread out. Her skin was as white as jade. And she was sleeping on her side peacefully. Her cherry lips were slightly parted. And her long, curly eyelashes were closed obediently. She was sleeping very comfortably. Stephen was wearing an iron gray suit and sitting on the stage in a refined manner. His forehead hair was tousled, revealing only his smooth profile and faint eyebrows and eyes. At this moment, he smiled slightly, with a bit of youthful greenness, and said proudly, "Very beautiful. Right?" My phone was about to explode. Private messages and group messages came one after another, all exploring the relationship between me and Stephen and questioning me that good things were about to happen. How come there was no hint at all? "Because we have broken up." I held my phone but didn't know how to reply. In the end, I could only choose to turn off the screen in desperation, and let the rumors spread on their own. After finally waiting for the lecture to end, I walked out following the flow of people. But a familiar voice came from behind. "Excuse me. Excuse me." It was Stephen's assistant Fang. He came towards me panting and whispered in my ear, "Mr. Song misses you very much. He can't come out conveniently. Can you stay and have a few words with him?" To avoid causing greater chaos and also to question his words just now, I followed Fang and re-entered the backstage of the auditorium for 1,000 people. Stephen was standing alone in the dressing room behind the scenes. He was thinking with his hand propped on his head for a while, and pacing back and forth for a while, as if worrying about something. I stood in the shadow at the door and watched him for a while. I found that there was a not very obvious scar on his forehead. I knocked on the door. He immediately looked over in surprise. He was tall and had long legs. He took 2 steps and 3 and pulled me into his arms, saying half complaining and half coquettously, "Why didn't you come to see me when I had a car accident? I look forward to your coming every day." I looked at him with wide eyes. My lips moved, but I didn't say anything. He continued to mutter, "There are a lot fewer of your things at home. Did we have a conflict and quarrel? Don't be angry anymore. Okay? I've come to pick you up and go home." He stroked down my arm. "You've lost weight." He took my hand again and squeezed it in his hand. "So cold. I'll warm it for you." Naturally, he lifted his clothes and let my hand stick to his abdominal muscles to warm. My emotions were so complicated that it wasn't until he had finished a series of actions that I really reacted. I looked into his eyes, trying to find any element of teasing or joking, but his eyes were sincere, and he was even a little ignorant of my rejection. I asked him, "Did you get injured on the head in the car accident?" He nodded obediently. I sighed and pulled my hand out of his. "You may have lost some memories, Mr. Song. Let me remind you that we have broken up." His eyes wide and in confusion. "Impossible. Although I did forget some fragments. I remembered that I bought a ring to propose to you. I I also booked the place for the proposal. And there are flowers and violinists. I booked them all. Why would we break up? He was a little anxious. Did I do something wrong? Can I apologize to you? Tell me where I went wrong, and I can change it. Don't just break up with me like this. Is it because I'm too dull in reaction? I'll change. I can learn. Of course not. Whether it was tearing off the tie with one hand and unbuttoning the shirt, or taking off the gold-rimmed glasses and taking off the watch on the hand, the reaction of a person who clearly knew nothing about feelings when being urged by me made me extremely moved. Is it because I cried and you found me annoying? But you clearly promised to accompany me to get a massage. You suddenly went back on your word. And I really felt very uncomfortable. Of course, not either. His tears fell like pearls, full of grievance and sadness. His stubborn self-esteem made him bury his face in his elbow and cry silently. No matter how I coaxed him, it didn't work. In the end, I compromised. Only then did he sniffle and stick ILY come to hold my hand and drag me out together. Is it because I refused you that day? But at that time you were sick and had a very high fever. I couldn't bear to let you be tired anymore. I was so embarrassed that my eyes wandered. He obviously had gone through his memories thoroughly and really couldn't find a place to apologize. Seeing that I still didn't speak, he blushed with shame and said with all his might, "Last time I didn't agree to what you wanted. This time it's okay. What do you want?" His face was so red that it seemed about to bleed. After stammering, he said, "Anything is fine." Me? How come after a car accident a person becomes so delicate? Fang, what's wrong with your boss? After I finally managed to get away, I asked Steven's assistant, "Didn't he tell you that we have broken up?" The boss didn't say anything. He specially accepted today's lecture to see you. Fang shook his head, thinking for a while. Fang added, "He was very nervous yesterday. He asked me to buy several suits and change them in turns, asking me which one looked better." I sighed silently. There was a sound of a car door from behind. Steven couldn't stay in the car alone. He tentatively stuck out a foot, and was glared back by me again. Realizing that he still didn't have the right to bargain with me, he pouted and retracted into the car with drooping eyebrows. "Your bosses." I pointed at my own head. "What did the doctor say?" Fang said. "The doctor said there's no problem. Except for the matter of breaking up with you. The boss remembers everything else clearly." I had a headache and pressed my temples. In the end, I just said to Fang, "Take your boss back and let him have a good rest." The car had already started. Steven was still looking longingly out of the window. "Won't my wife go back with me?" "Who's your wife?" "We've already broken up." I returned to the dormitory. The rebroadcast of Steven's interview was still playing on the TV on the first floor of the dormitory. His face was steady and calm. His facial features were distinct and sharp. He answered with ease. Everyone said that he had a broad mindset, long-term vision, and a promising future. He was an emerging business elite that couldn't be ignored. It's all an illusion. As soon as he got home, he would neatly put on an apron and cook. He would coax me like an old mother to eat more vegetables, and not be picky about food. When he got a contract, he would go home and lie in my arms asking for a reward. If he missed a good opportunity, he would go home with a listless air and I would have to coax him for half the night. He must sleep close to me. If he woke up at night and found himself far away from me, he would immediately get close and put my hand on his chest before he could sleep soundly again. He took many pictures of me, and then replaced all his phone and computer wallpapers with my pictures without hiding it from anyone. The famous Steven is actually an invincible love-struck fool. I stood downstairs in the dormitory and watched the TV for a while before going upstairs. You saw me and asked, "Aren't you going home with your husband?" This silly girl finally realized what happened today. She waved her phone at me. The school for a Ms. about to explode. At the same time, this Mr. Song who was mentioned sent me a message. "Wife, I miss you. Who? When I'm not around." Steven usually has no expression on his face. So it's hard for me to imagine what expression he had and in what posture he typed the word woo-woo on the small phone screen. Then he asked again, "Is the mattress in the dormitory soft enough? Do you want me to send you one? Wife, a lot of your clothes are still at home. Shall I bring them to you? What are we having for dinner tonight? Shall I take my wife to eat?" I replied in a fit of pique, "We've broken up. Don't call me wife." A tall guy on the other side shamelessly started to act shamelessly. "I don't agree. I've forgotten. What if my wife deceived me?" I was filled with frustration and couldn't vent it. I threw myself into the quilt. The upper bunk and lower desk in the dormitory creaked, startling Yu, who was watching the forum with relish. I had clearly planned to never contact him again. But now, listening to the phone buzzing by my ear, I couldn't control myself from picking it up and looking at it. "Wife, I really can't imagine we would break up. Who brought it up anyway? Was it me? Impossible. Was it just angry words from my wife? But no matter when. I will never agree to such a request from my wife. I will definitely be shameless and apologize crazily. Anyway, it's absolutely impossible to agree to break up. But it's all my fault no matter what. So give me a chance to make it up to you." Then, at the end, he sent a cute dog scratching the wall emoji. Logically speaking, I should have cleanly deleted all his contact information. But I couldn't bring myself to have the thought of hating him, or staying away from him, no matter what. So I could only scold him in my heart, "Big idiot." In the end, I still resolutely refused Steven's invitation to meet and went to the cafeteria to get food honestly. On the way back, a dog's head peeked out from the green belt. Immediately after, a little yellow dog nimbly emerged from the bushes and squatted at my feet familiarly, wagging its tail. As I had expected, I squatted down and fed it the chicken leg meat I had prepared. Actually, I was a bit afraid of dogs at first. But this little dog very skillfully used a gradual approach and in an extremely hateful way tricked me into trusting it, and gave it my chicken leg. At first, it would only stay far away by the corner, blinking its two black and bright eyes and looking at me. Its head would move slowly along with my steps. Once we got familiar, it would carefully approach and squat by the roadside waiting. Then it would follow me at a moderate distance. After seeing me back to the dormitory, it would leave slowly. Before I knew it, I had already been able to naturally accept that wagging its tail and rubbing against my leg. I even consciously brought food for it. I touched its ear. It shook its fur comfortably, raised its head following the strength of my hand, and gently touched my chin with its lips. Looking at its wagging head and tail, I always felt it was familiar. Suddenly, I thought that Steven was the same. He was interested in me and found all kinds of excuses to show up in front of me and get familiar with me for various reasons. By the time I realized it, we were already in a relationship where I was holding his mate and being kissed by him on the dim cinema chair. I scratched the little dog's chin and pointed at its nose. I said to it, "Sly little dog." The little yellow dog didn't know what I was talking about. After eating the chicken leg and being petted, it was extremely happy and kept circling around me. Steven is my college alumnus. He is several grades above me. I met him when I was doing an exclusive interview with outstanding alumni for the school. His appearance is extremely deceptive. He has high cheekbones and long, narrow outer corners of his eyes. His facial lines are clean and neat. As long as he doesn't speak, he looks cold and aloof, like a snow-clad mountain. However, as soon as he opens his mouth, that icy temperament immediately disappears and becomes indescribable. When we first met, he was extremely frustrated with the company's affairs. When he pushed open the door and entered the meeting room, his anger hadn't subsided yet. Why does old Wang always ask me to do such things? Isn't he also an alumnus? What? My face is more intimidating? Alumni interviews can't be done casually. In the middle of speaking, his eyes just fell on me. The resentment he was venting immediately disappeared completely. He just stared at me blankly. His words came to an abrupt halt. Feigned. His assistant, who was following behind and holding materials, came in. After not hearing Stephen's next instruction for a long time, he asked in confusion, "Stephen?" Stephen immediately cleared his throat twice. When he spoke again, his words had taken a turn and became, "Alumni interviews can't be done casually. We must cooperate precisely with the junior schoolmate and complete the task efficiently, and strive to fulfill our responsibility of promoting our alma mater." Fang. The camera had been set up in advance, and the lights had also been set up in advance. Next, as long as Stephen answered according to the interview outline I had prepared in advance, it would be a success. I pressed the record button and gave Stephen a signal. Stephen introduced himself to the camera. "I am Stephen from JIUHE Investment." "Very good. Our company mainly does quantitative private equity. At present, the fundraising has exceeded 1 billion. Normal. At present, we have continuously invested in projects related to healthcare, chips, and film and television technology, and we are continuously making profits. No problem. My hobbies usually include fitness." He secretly glanced at me with his peripheral vision, straight and his back, and showed off the smooth lines that couldn't be covered by his suit in a reserved way. "I have a muscular body. Wait. Something strange has slipped in. My cooking skills are also very good. Cooking, stir-frying, and making soup are all within my capabilities." Fang coughed twice. Stephen also realized that he had digressed. In a flustered manner, he brought the topic back and said passionately, "In the golden autumn season, the fragrance of osmanthus fills the air. As one of the numerous students of my alma mater, with a pure heart, I express the warmest, most heartfelt, and most sincere congratulations to my alma mater. I wish my alma mater will become better and better." As he spoke, he also stood up and waved his fist in the air extremely solemnly. The moment the recording stopped, Stephen felt embarrassed by himself. He turned his back and faced the wall, covering his face with his hands. His neck and ears were faintly visible as being bright red. Since the end of the last interview recording, Stephen has appeared around me with much greater frequency. First, because he left such a deep impression on me last time, that now whenever I see Stephen in magazines or on TV, I can accurately recognize him, and I can't help but compare the seemingly cold and handsome guy with the silly beauty in my memory. Second, his frequency of appearing on campus has indeed increased significantly. The business school has launched a series of lectures by Stephen. Posters of various lectures are plastered all over the campus. On them is printed his handsome and formal side profile in a suit. The line from the tip of his nose to his chin forms a beautiful arc, which directly attracts juniors and seniors to flood the lecture hall where he gives lectures. It is said that the enthusiasm of the audience is so great that even those responsible for live streaming and shooting from the student union's press corps can only stand on tiptoes and barely have a place with the help of their equipment. Interviewing Stephen has become a highly sought-after opportunity. Everyone in the press corps wants to be struck by his beauty face to face. A junior who was fortunate enough to get the opportunity screamed at me repeatedly after interviewing Stephen, "He's really so handsome. And his figure is really super good. His voice is also super magnetic. Oh my god. Does such a perfect person really exist in the world?" At this time, his solemn congratulatory message to his alma mater would echo in my ears. Regarding the junior's sentiment, "I cannot agree." The junior also said, "Senior, he specifically mentioned you. He asked me why Cynthia from your press corps didn't come. I was just coming out of the library after self-study and heading back to the dormitory. Downstairs in the dormitory, I saw a figure that was different from all the various roomers. Because he was alone, he looked extremely desolate. He was wearing a black hoodie and a black mask, looking at the couples being affectionate downstairs in the girls' dormitory with a confused expression. His eyes were about to be filled with jealousy. He didn't know what he was thinking. Suddenly, as if cheering himself up, he clenched his fists with both hands and patted his chest, like a silent gorilla shouting. As I passed by him, I found him familiar. I went back and hesitantly called out softly. Mr. Song? Here. Immediately. He reflexively put his hands behind his back and straightened up. Who is Mr. Song waiting for here? I wanted to find you. I sent you a WeChat message. But you didn't reply to me. So I asked around and found this place. He said sorry. Cynthia is quite popular. Many people know you. Stephen and I have only met twice. He stood there looking down at me. But he always reminds me of the little yellow dog wagging its tail and waiting for me to stroke it. So I felt inexplicably guilty. I'm sorry. Mr. Song. My phone is out of power. So I didn't see your message. Do you have something to find me for? I will be giving lectures on campus these 2 days. For the post-lecture interview. Can you please help? Cynthia and I have known each other for a relatively long time and have a better rapport. So, he showed a little panic very appropriately. Does Cynthia have other things to do? It's okay. If it really doesn't work, I can adapt by myself. I vaguely felt that what he said sounded generous. But in fact, there was some indescribable strange meaning. However, his expression was droopy, and he looked melancholic. As if he was really worried about this matter. I pursed my lips. I don't have any urgent matters recently. If Mr. Song thinks it's better for me to interview, then I will apply to the teacher. His expression visibly brightened. Laughter rippled in his bright black eyes. He quickly took out the warm milk tea that had been hidden and warmed in his arms and stuffed it into my hand. He was the one who liked me first. But I was the one who pierced through this layer of window paper first. Sitting in the pitch-black cinema, there was no one around. On the big screen, a newly released romantic comedy was playing. The male protagonist was trying his best to make the female protagonist notice his feelings. I had a sudden inspiration. I pulled Stephen's sleeve and asked in his ear, "Do you like me?" He choked on a mouthful of milk tea and coughed for a long time. In the dim light of the movie, I could also see his completely red face. He stammered, when he walked out of the cinema. His expression was still a little annoyed and a little aggrieved. He murmured, "This kind of thing should be done by boys. There should be a restaurant, a suit, a bouquet of flowers, and a carefully prepared confession. Instead of stammering and being incoherent and asking if you want to be with me like this." I shook the hand that was intertwined with his fingers. "Isn't it okay as long as the result is good?" He still wanted to pretend to be annoyed. But the corners of his lips had already secretly curved up. His expression was shy and rippling, like a pool of spring water ruffled by the wind. After holding back and holding back, he finally swung his fist at the air twice with a whoosh and made a shooting motion. Then he turned his head and looked at me and smiled. He was so absorbed in being silly that he didn't see the telegraph pole in front of him. Without reducing any force, he bumped into it with a thud, and immediately had to streams of bright red nosebleed. Stephen is such a person with a childish temperament. He was cute and likable since he was young. When he grew up, even with a naughty nature, he still carved out his own business territory. Everything went so smoothly. So it was natural for me to think that he was the type who had been through many romantic encounters. So when I heard him say that I was his first love, I was so shocked that I couldn't even hold the spoon in my hand anymore. It fell into the bowl with a clang, creating small waves. To be honest, I didn't believe it. If it was the first time, why would he be so proficient in mastering the skills of chasing girls? If it was the first time, why could he so effortlessly lead me into his trap? At this time, he would always say very proudly, "Who let me have a high emotional intelligence? Even if I haven't eaten pork. I've seen pigs run." But when he kissed, his inexperienced reaction, his completely red earlobes when stammering love words. And at that time, even though he was extremely nervous but always pretended to beat up for Bally. When I teased him, until he blushed, with his neck raised, forming an alluring and vulnerable arc, I believed his words again. I was also in love for the first time. Therefore, I would only express my feelings in a very straightforward way. For Stephen's little thoughts and his tough words, my only way to judge was to look into his eyes. When he heard me directly say to him, he said, "Oh, you really like me so much that you always hit me with a straight ball. I really can't do anything about you." While his eyes glanced around and finally fixed on the lower right corner. This was shyness. When he knew that there was an opportunity for a private date, he would jump up like he was injected with adrenaline and enthusiastically look through his phone. His eyes were curved, and there were many twinkling stars hidden inside. This was happiness. When he learned that the appointment to go for a massage with him was cancelled due to a task arranged temporarily by the tutor, his lips would pout high and the corners of his eyes would droop pitifully. On the surface, I generously said, "I won't compete with an old man. Of course. Studies should come first." After I finished my task, I found him pitifully sitting on the sofa wiping tears. I hugged his waist from behind and rested my chin on his shoulder, softly coaxing him. He was very proud and turned away from me, ignoring me. And he announced that only if I accompanied him to go out for a massage and have a meal would he talk to me. This is grievance. I believe that eyes can reflect a person's truest thoughts from the inside out. So during the quarrel before the breakup, when he was holding a cigarette and said to me, "What's wrong with smoking? If you can't stand my smoking, then break up." At that moment, I instantly calmed down from my emotional state and followed my line of sight to observe his eyes. After seeing a flash of helplessness and regret behind which there was a hint of impatience, I immediately said okay. I walked into the room to pack my things. I put the seasonal clothes into the suitcase and took away my various electronic devices, cosmetics, and skincare products. The entire bedroom was instantly half empty. Stephen was very restless and walked back and forth in the living room. Finally, he stomped into the room and asked me, "Really break up?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Don't secretly hide and cry by yourself and then regret it later. Okay?" I said, "No." He gritted his teeth and couldn't say an apology no matter what. He just asked, "Really? Really want to break up?" I snapped the suitcase shut and stood it up, pushing it and walking out. "Yes. Exactly. And it was you who said break up." I just agreed. Just after the breakup, in those few days when I returned to school, my state was really not very good. I barely mustered up energy to go to class. After class, I went straight back to the dormitory and stared at the literature with a posture of staring through the computer. After several days like this, my friends thought something was wrong and finally pried out the fact that I had broken up from me. They didn't know that my ex-boyfriend was Stephen. They only knew that I was dating an older man outside of school and was secretly sad because of the sudden breakup. They surrounded me. Some said, "There's a 188 cm tall athletic junior who asked me for your WeChat. Just one word from you. If you agree, I'll push it over. There are so many trees in the world. Why hang yourself on a crooked tree?" Some said, "Go clubbing at night and all troubles will disappear. Open a table tonight. Sister will treat you. Cheer up." I didn't want to reject my friend's kindness. I went clubbing too. In the midst of the noise, I huddled alone in the corner, holding a wine glass. In my mind, I only thought about Stephen. I rejected many people who came to strike up a conversation and finally fled in panic from the excitement. The 188 cm tall junior also added me. But after greeting each other, I no longer had the energy to respond to either his conversations or invitations in real life. So with apology, I honestly explained to the junior that I was currently in an emotional dilemma. "I'm not ready to start a new relationship yet." I added you presumptuously. "I'm sorry." When I agreed to break up with Stephen, I was resolute and decisive. But there was always a breath held in my heart. I didn't know who I was competing with. My roommate came back from class and casually said, "Stephen is coming to the school to give a lecture." I instantly straightened up from the draft paper. I heard that he seems to have had a car accident recently. Fortunately, the impact is not great. My heart seemed to be grabbed by a big hand. The pen in my hand paused. For the next half an hour, I fell into the black hole named Steven again. Why didn't he even tell me about something like a car accident? Isn't this guy very good at being coquettish? Or is it that an ex should be like a dead person, quietly and completely kicked out of one's daily life? With a mixed and sour mood, I walked into the lecture hall. When I saw him sitting on the stage in a decent posture intact, I still breathed a sigh of relief. Saying that I don't like him or hate him anymore is all lies. However, lovers who date with feelings of love don't always be able to go on so easily and lastingly. Steven is very busy with his work, and I am also under great academic pressure. There is very little time when both of us are free at the same time. Even if we occasionally have enough time to meet, I can easily notice the deep fatigue in the other's eyes. The constantly reducing time together obviously has a much greater impact on Steven than on me. And his way of dealing with uneasiness is to find a sense of existence here with all kinds of excuses and reasons. Trying to awaken my emotional fluctuations and teasing with willful words. And testing my bottom line with childish words. He clearly knows how much I value this relationship. He clearly knows that he has said wrong things and done wrong things. But he refuses to apologize, making me feel sad, sour, and restless. In fact, the contradictions are not impossible to trace back to the source. Little things have been slowly piling up in life. It's just that before, he used cockawful to gloss over them. When two people live together, points of friction always suddenly appear at unexpected times. But his attitude of giving up made me suddenly calm down and start thinking, is such a relationship really feasible? And just a few days after the lecture, Fang called me. Miss Xiang. Fang just called me once. And then there was a rustling background noise on the other end of the phone. I could vaguely distinguish Steven guiding Fang to speak. Fang then said, Steven wants to ask Miss Xiang to accompany him to the re-examination. Steven said he doesn't want to go to the hospital alone. He will be afraid. I paused. Except for his lively personality, Steven is a non-typical novel hero. He is young and successful in his career. But at the same time, he has a lot of pampered habits. He is afraid of the dark, has claustrophobia, stomach problems, and is also afraid of blood and needles. The hospital is the base of all these things. He will never step into the hospital unless it is a critical moment. Steven babbled a lot more. Fang said with difficulty. Steven said that he knows Miss Xiang is very busy. If his sudden invitation disturbs Miss Xiang's schedule, it doesn't matter if Miss Xiang refuses. He is just a little lonely, a little desolate, and a little pitiful. It's still no problem for him to go to the hospital for a re-examination by himself. Me. So much tea. I said. Then please ask Steven to summon up courage, overcome it, and achieve a great progress in life. After saying that, I hung up the phone. I was having hot pot with some friends. Steven pretended to pass by our booth, greeted us in surprise. Xiang, you are here too? He was still wearing his formal clothes that he didn't have time to take off, and his forehead was slightly sweating because of haste. He shamelessly asked the waiter to add a chair beside me and sat down. He warmly said, It's fate to meet. I'll treat this meal today. Steven then distributed the paper bags he was carrying one by one. The bags were printed with the logo of a famous gold store. A little token of me and Xiang. Please accept it. They knew about the things between me and Steven, and were originally prepared to give him a cold shoulder. But their firm determination vanished after opening the glittering gift box. Now they are smiling like sunflowers, greeting the waiter to bring tableware for Steven. Then they solicitously ask Steven if he wants more dishes. They are almost about to pick up the blanched dishes and put them in his bowl personally. I am extremely distressed. Steven's money power is quite useful. With a wave of his hand, he directly donated a large studio to the college, along with a complete set of lighting and photography equipment. With his own efforts, he solved the problem of the college's shortage of funds. When the counselor and the dean see me, They are both grinning widely with big white teeth and happily saying thank you to me. In the evening, I go for a night run by the river. After finishing the run, I am stretching my legs by leaning against the dam. Suddenly, a person leans over beside me, looking me up and down with lewd eyes. This person looks familiar to me. Occasionally, I can see him sitting in a corner near the school, whistling at the passing female students or following behind them and saying some frivolous words loudly. If a female student scolds him, he will even start to pester her. The school security guards drive him away, but he reappears after a while, causing people to be in a state of panic. Today, perhaps seeing that there are few people around, he becomes bold and directly leans on the dam, with a pair of eyes full of red blood vessels. He is grinning mischievously. Little beauty. Running alone? You have a great figure. I quietly retract my stretched leg and quickly walk towards the place where people are gathering. He follows me and pesters me playfully for a while. Seeing that I ignore him, he grabs my wrist with the help of alcohol and pulls me so that I can't leave. Little beauty. Why are you walking so fast? Stay and talk to brother for a while. I am sweating coldly and observe the surroundings. There are exceptionally few people running at night today. There are even fewer people who will notice me being pestered by a scoundrel half in the darkness. Seeing that the scoundrel is in a daze, I turn around and give a hard kick to his crotch. Taking advantage of the moment when he releases my wrist, I quickly run towards the crowd. That scoundrel recovers a bit, and then starts cursing and rushes over to catch me. I run forward desperately, but I can still smell the increasingly fishy smell behind me. A tall figure appears in front of me. He grabs my arm, tucks me behind him, and rushes up to give a kick to the scoundrel's chest. It's Stephen. I take 2 breaths and immediately take out my phone to call the police. Seeing that Stephen is tall and big, the scoundrel already shows fear on his face. He stands not far away, his eyes shining brightly. Brother, you don't know. This woman is not honest. She was standing there seductively luring me. If you like, the 2 of us can do it together. It's not. Before he finishes speaking, he is punched in the face by Stephen, who lunges forward. He still wants to defend himself, but all he can say are pleas for mercy. I have never seen Stephen like this. Baring his fangs, he looks down at the scoundrel with half-closed eyes, as if looking at a lifeless stone that can be trampled on at will. In the distance, the sound of police sirens rings. Stephen's movement pauses for a moment. The scoundrel takes the opportunity to push Stephen. Stephen is pushed squarely, and his whole back hits the edge of the dam. He lets out a muffled groan. The sound of chaotic footsteps rings out. I panic and rush forward to support Stephen. Where did you hit? Is it broken? Is there nothing wrong with the bones? Did you hit your head? Stephen, who hates going to the hospital the most, visits the hospital for the 2nd time in a short period. The doctor applies alcohol to the abrasions on his elbow and knuckles. He exaggerated hisses, but his eyes are firmly fixed on me. I am holding Stephen's coat and anxiously ask, Doctor, it should be okay, right? Ignoring Stephen's winking, the emergency doctor says seriously, this is the lightest injury I have seen this week. If you come later, these abrasions will heal. Me. Stephen. The doctor pushes up his glasses and asks Stephen, were you winking at me just now? Sorry. I didn't see it. Stephen senses my softened attitude and seizes the opportunity. The frequency of his appearance in my life rises sharply. He perseveres in sending me messages for several weeks. Today he sends a revealing photo of him biting the corner of his clothes. With his muscles neatly arranged on his tight chest and abdomen, he deliberately chooses a top-down perspective, with long eyelashes half-drooped and thin lips slightly bitten. Tomorrow he sends a photo of him, wearing a suit with the buttons of his white shirt half undone. The faintly visible muscle lines extend all the way to an indescribable place. The day after tomorrow he sends a photo of him working out. Sweat drops are about to fall. The casual yet seemingly crafted muscle lines make my roommate, who happens to pass by behind me, exclaim exaggerated. In between the photos are interspersed with sincere apology essays. The essays are not typed but handwritten and photographed. Stephen rambles on for several pages, thoroughly reviewing his lack of male morality. This essay can be translated into one sentence. Sorry, wife. I was wrong. Forgive me. After I read it, I will occasionally reply with read. Occasionally. Stephen will also send me videos. The videos he sends me and the videos Fang sends me alone can often be watched in sets. For example, he sends a video of himself wearing a small green floral apron and standing meekly in front of the stove stewing chicken soup, looking like a virtuous man with a peaceful life. Fang will send a video of Stephen himself, wearing gloves and chasing chickens on a small hillside. The yellow-haired free-range chicken is so startled that it keeps squawking and flying. In the end, when caught by Stephen, it still flaps its wings, dropping chicken feathers all over Stephen. Stephen happily walks over holding the chicken. This chicken can run so well. The meat must be very fresh. My wife should like it. He also seriously says to Fang, you quickly learn online how to take good-looking videos. It's best to make me look more homey but not lose my handsomeness. My wife likes my face. Stephen happily goes to find the boss to kill the chicken. Fang concludes the video. He wails at the camera. Miss Xiang, if you don't come back soon, the boss will go crazy. And I will also go crazy. My gaze shifts to the table. The chicken soup that appears in the video is now lying safely in the thermos cup in front of me. One night, I was completing the reading task assigned by my tutor when Stephen called. After connecting, neither of us spoke. There was only the quiet sound of breathing in the microphone. After a long time, his hoarse apology sounded. Xiang Xiang. I remember everything. I'm sorry. He stammers and says. Actually, I'm not. Actually, after I knew that you don't like the smell of cigarettes, I quit. That day I was actually deliberately doing it. I just wanted to make you angry. I just wanted you to pay attention to me. I say slowly. But don't you know that saying such things will make me sad? Don't you know that I especially hate others joking about feelings? He immediately answers, anxiously saying, I know. That's why I regretted it immediately. I was actually being unreasonable. Those days you didn't pay much attention to me. I just wanted you to pay more attention to me and coax me more. At that time, I didn't think before I spoke. So I said break up. You are always indifferent. I always feel a lack of security with you. You don't want the things I buy for you. My good looks seem to have no effect on you. I really don't know what to use to attract you. So I finally made a mistake. Clearly knowing that this is your bottom line. Yet still recklessly jumping on it. I say. In the past, I considered a future with you. Maybe it would be marriage. And maybe there would be children. But at that time, all the possibilities of the future were overturned by me. His voice was filled with the urgency of fear. I'll change. I won't make such a mistake again. I'll change. He was usually such a glib person. But at this time, he could only repeat the same words over and over like a broken record and became tongue-tied. On New Year's Eve, I was sent by the press to photograph the New Year's Eve activities at Tianjin Square. I stood at the crowded square entrance inside, thinking that even if I squeezed in, I would only be able to photograph people and nothing else. I was about to leave when I was pushed into the surging crowd by a group of laughing boys behind me. At the moment of being pushed, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The crowd surged in from all directions, carrying me forward almost suspended in my dress. Completely losing my sense of direction. My phone was teetering in my coat pocket. But I could only spare two efforts. One was used to protect the precious camera, and the other was used to maintain balance around me. The crowd showed no sign of dispersing. Instead, in the continuous progress, it seemed to become even more crowded. I couldn't even take care of the camera anymore. I tried hard to push against the pressure from all directions with my hands and even felt that breathing was becoming difficult. The shops around me had closed their doors at some point. The crowded section still had passers-by continuously joining in, completely filling the street. The voices of people came like waves from all directions. I heard people in French shouting, "Don't push! Don't push!" And also heard people behind moving forward with noise and commotion. Police whistles seemed to come from around the street. The fluorescent traces on them formed a fan-shaped light track in front of me. Everything seemed to start becoming blurred, and my attention slowly began to disperse. The pressure on my chest and the exhaustion from lack of oxygen made my head dizzy in waves. It hurt everywhere. My squeezed calf hurt. The squeezed chest made me breathe like a bellows with a hoarse sound. I tripped over something under my feet and immediately lost control and fell to one side. At this moment, a big hand reached out and pulled me out of the crowd like a radish. When I really came to my senses, I found myself placed on the roadside across the street. My chest hurt very much. When breathing, there was a continuous rush of blood smell. I tentatively moved my arm and found that there were already lumps of bruises on my arm at some point, and they had even turned bluish-purple. The camera was gone. Only a strap was still hanging around my neck. The phone was still stubbornly stuck in my pocket. I took out my phone. It was already early morning. As soon as I lit up the screen, a large string of messages and missed calls popped up. All were from Steven. "Wife. I just passed by the Tianjin Square and saw you walking past with a camera on your back. Is wife going to take pictures? Do you want to have a meal together after you finish? Is wife done? Wife. I heard that there are a lot of people at Tianjin. Now traffic has been restricted. Wife. Where are you? Are you still safe? I heard something happened at Tianjin. Wife. Where are you?" He was completely panicked. The remaining messages were interspersed with several missed calls. "Wife. Don't scare me." The last message was, "Please don't have an accident." My fingers were still a bit stiff. I slowly typed to him, "I'm fine." Almost immediately, a call came in. First, there was a sound of relieved heavy breathing from the other end. Then Steven's voice rang out, Where are you?" His breathing was very heavy, and there was the sound of wind in the background. I looked around in confusion and tried hard to identify the direction. Then the police cars, ambulances, and the coming and going crowds parked by the roadside made me temporarily lose my ability to judge directions. Seeing that I didn't answer for a long time, he asked again, "What are the landmark buildings nearby?" He had a hint of pleading, "Talk to me. Think. Please. Talk to me." I cleared my throat and gently described the characteristics of my location. He quickly knew my position. Almost 5 minutes later, he appeared in front of me. His complexion was not good. The neat coat on his body had become wrinkled, and his hair was messed up by the wind. There was a faint trace of blood, and a wiped mark under his nose. The two of us looked at each other. He almost greedily traced the outline of my facial features with his eyes. I asked him, "Did you have a nosebleed?" He grunted in a muffled voice. Like a big bear, he wrapped me in his arms. "It's just a nosebleed from nervousness. It's nothing." Through the coat, I felt the wetness on my shoulder. He sobbed and said, I thought you." He spat forcefully at an empty space beside him several times, then wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, making his still handsome face a mess. Private cars are not allowed to get too close. Steven led me for a long time before we reached the car. Along the way, he didn't say a word. He just kept wiping tears. Passing by a convenience store, I pulled his hand closer to me. "I didn't have dinner, and I'm a bit hungry." He wiped his tears again before turning around and walking into the convenience store and coming out with rice balls and milk. He quickly opened the packaging of the rice ball for me and put it in my hand. When we walked to this street, there were not many people. It was completely different from the suffocating commotion just now. The steam from the rice ball rose and hit my face. Only then did I belatedly have a feeling of surviving a disaster. "Steven. I almost died just now." Steven immediately covered my mouth and glared at me with red eyes. "Don't say unlucky words." I nodded at him. And then he let me go. I took a couple of bites of the rice ball and said, I lost my camera. Steven took off the rice grain from the corner of my mouth for me. I'll buy you one. The latest one? Yeah. As I raised and lowered my arm, the bruises that couldn't be covered by the cuff were exposed. Steven reasonably shed tears again. It hurts. Can you apply medicine for me? Yeah. Then let's go home together. Steven stood up and picked me up. Before leaving, I leaned into his ear and said, buy some of that and take it back. I just couldn't help but want to hug him. That's all. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, I first opened my phone to read the news. Thanks to the timely intervention of the authorities, there were no casualties in yesterday's stampede. I replied too many messages of concern from people who knew I was going to interview at Tianjin G Square before slowly getting up and getting dressed. Steven was like a little wife, hugging the quilt and half leaning against the head of the bed. He was a bit anxious but didn't know what to say. He just looked at me urgently with his eyes. After having breakfast, I asked, can you take me back to my dorm? He immediately became dejected. He circled around me. Why? Why? After what we've been through, doesn't it mean we're making up? I watched his happy spirits gradually fade and found it interesting to tease him. After a while, I said, I need to go back to the dorm to pack things. Steven sent me back to the dormitory. I didn't want him to park his car so ostentatiously near the school, so I gave him a list of skincare products and directed him to go to the street and buy them for me. Steven happily went with Fang. In the dormitory, I slowly put my commonly used items into the box. After packing for only a short while, I received a video sent by Fang. In the video, Steven is walking in the mall and muttering to Fang, what does my wife mean? She said she wants to go back to the dormitory to pack up things. Does it mean she will move back to live with me later? Am I not misunderstanding? Does wife mean getting back together? But she didn't say anything. It should be okay, right? My wife doesn't like me. Why yesterday? Yesterday. Could it be that she just lusts after my body? He opened his collar. When the crowd didn't notice, he secretly took a look inside his collar. It's really big. I'm also lustful myself. Fang. Does my wife like my body me more? Steven stopped in front of the skincare counter and quickly took out 2 bags. He passed by a home store. Standing in front of the window, he studied it for a long time with his chin propped up. Then he walked in righteously. My wife's was torn by me yesterday. I want to buy several new sets for my wife. Fang boss. I don't want to know the details. Yu was biting a chicken leg in her mouth. Her feet were firmly placed on the stool. At this moment, she was shaking her head and sighing. Well, the sour smell of love has reached me. I touched the corner of my mouth that had curled up at some point and exited the video. Steven was very excited from picking me up to going home. He chattered on for a long time, saying things like he ordered a new carpet today. It will be very comfortable to step on it barefoot in winter. He didn't dare to say that he bought me a lot of underwear. He only said that he bought a lot of home clothes that can be changed and worn. He thinks our relationship is still in an ambiguous intermediate stage of getting back together. So he always looks at me carefully with his eyes throughout. I know the subtle probing behind each of his seemingly ordinary words. At night when the lights are turned off, he comes over and hugs me. His arm is extremely heavy when it presses over. His hot breath sprinkles on the side of my neck. At night, it is very quiet. The sound of his heart pounding is particularly obvious. Xiang, are we considered reconciled now? I seriously asked him, at that time, if you didn't really want to break up, why didn't you apologize? He said hoarsely, because you agreed too easily. It was as if my proposal to break up was exactly what you wanted. At that time, my heart turned cold. I thought you must not like me anymore. That's why you agreed so relieved lie, and then left with your bag on your back. As if getting rid of some worthless junk. In fact, at that time I really didn't understand. Why? Usually we would have arguments because of various problems. But we would make up soon. Why did you break up with me just because I lost my temper once? At that time I cried a lot. Fang couldn't stand it anymore. He said if I apologize to you, you will definitely forgive me. I said, Fang, you don't understand. This time I am really abandoned. I turned around and smoothed his hair. In the future, if you feel insecure, tell me honestly. Happy things and unhappy things. Tell me all of them. Don't say break up so easily anymore. I don't want us to really miss each other. His voice faintly carried a sob. Steven sniffed and asked, so are we reconciled? We will live a good life together in the future. I touched his face. It was wet. But he stubbornly said, it's not my tears. It's that I'm too cold. So snot is everywhere. I kissed him on the corner of his mouth. I like you very much. So even if it stares, it doesn't matter. He kept asking, will you like me for a long time? For now. It seems so. This sentence was firmly remembered by Steven. The next day when he got up, he didn't even change his pajamas. He rummaged through boxes and drawers to find the engagement ring he ordered before the quarrel. His eyes were shining like there are stars in them. Then he said a bunch of nonsense without much substance. In general, it can be summarized in 3 words, marry me. I asked him, we just reconciled yesterday, right? He nodded. What does this have to do with my application for regularization now? It seems that there is really no relationship. So I stretched out my hand to him and said to him lazily, actually, I like plain rings. He quickly put the ring on me. Then he kissed the back of my hand twice and hugged me with the quilt. I'll change it for you later. Steven's perspective. I don't know why after a car accident and waking up, I lost my fragrant and soft wife. I was lying on the bed, staring straight at the door of the ward. Any slight noise at the door could make me instantly prick up my ears and open my eyes wide. Only when I saw the angels in white coming in did I listlessly shrink back onto the bed. I vaguely remember having a quarrel with my wife. But it can't be. Right? Can't be that I had a car accident and my wife is still so stubborn and refuses to come and see me. I asked Fang. But Fang doesn't know anything. Lying on the bed, I only felt that I had been abandoned by the whole world. When I got home and wanted to hug my wife and act cocky the sly, I found that half of the room was already empty. Even my wife's smell had almost dissipated. I was very aggrieved. But I couldn't figure out why. It seemed like we broke up. But why? I had no one to ask. So I could only think hard by myself. My heart it's already in swollen lie. It must be that my wife discovered my true nature, and thought that I was always pestering her and was too childish. I didn't seem like a man who could protect her. But my wife is always indifferent. Only occasionally does she show a coquettish look. I just want to use all kinds of childish tricks to make my wife have some reaction to prove that she still loves me. Is it that my wife is impatient because I cry too much and always need to be coaxed? Is it that I have too much work and always can't match my wife's time? So there is very little time for us to go on a date together. So my wife is unhappy? I anxiously walked around the house twice and unconsciously reached into my pocket and touched a full pack of cigarettes with only one smoked. I originally wanted to take one out and light it. But the moment I held the cigarette, it felt extremely hot. I threw the cigarette away with an intuition that I couldn't smoke it no matter what. I couldn't sleep at night either. I took out all my wife's clothes that she hadn't had time to take away and piled them on the bed. I hugged them and smelled them hard. Only then did I sleep a full night's sleep for the first time in so many days. But the price of this full night's sleep was a long and terrible nightmare. I dreamed that my wife went back to school. Then an indistinguishable male student pursued her. That male student held a bouquet of flowers, and said that he was very mature, and wouldn't always make her angry. He could make money and cook. So he asked my wife to be his girlfriend. I was so angry that I didn't know where the chopping board, kitchen knife and spatula in my hand came from. I cut the ingredients with loud bangs, and said that your cooking is definitely not as delicious as mine. The two people inexplicably entered a competition in a cooking contest. As a result, my wife not only didn't cheer for me, but instead kept staying by that hateful male student, helping him and even feeding him fruits. While competing, I was shedding tears and sniffling. My vision was so blurred that I couldn't even see the ingredients in my hand. I was both anxious and annoyed. I felt that I didn't have a handsome and dashing image, nor could I display my own advantageous specialties. Waking up from such a nightmare, I was extremely anxious and angry. I really wanted to talk to my wife, but it was early in the morning, and I didn't want to disturb her. So I could only take out my phone and skillfully open the photo album I specially created for my wife, which contains many photos and videos of her. My racing heart didn't completely calm down until I heard my wife's gentle voice in the video. I set the video to play repeatedly, and then slowly sank into the pillow and lay back in the tranquility of the late night. At the same time, I made up my mind, in any case, I must get my wife back. No matter what. Using any tricks or stratagems is fine. Anyway, my wife won't notice. If my wife likes this green tea act, then it doesn't matter if I shed all my tears. In any case, I must get my wife back. If my wife is angry, then I will keep apologizing, acting coquettously and being shameless. What's the use of face? I want my wife, not face. Finally, in the repeated gentle words in my wife's video, I was finally able to rest. The end.